Hannah looked at the pile of papers on the kitchen table. Cold documents that represented the end of 15 years together. She slowly got up from the chair, as if even her body was tired from so much trying. The house was too quiet for a Friday. The kids were at school and he was where he always was. Working. That's what he did. Work. She took a deep breath, looked at the papers on the table, and felt a pang in her chest. They were just papers, she kept telling herself. Just a formality. The end had happened long ago. And to think that they had been so in love. 15 years ago, Hannah had just graduated from her accounting course. At 22, full of dreams, she planned to work in an office in the small town. It was at a graduation party that she met Carl. He was 10 years older, with calloused hands and deep eyes that seemed to hold stories he never told. Carl was a simple man from the countryside, raised with more hoe than affection. His parents were always busy with the farm, and he grew up learning that the world was a tough place where one survives with effort and without complaint. Few words, many calluses. He moved to the city when he was still young, after his older brother settled there. He worked as a driver for a local transport company and shared a small apartment with 2 colleagues. And it was in the city that he met Hannah, with her steady eyes and sweet smile. She was almost 10 years younger, also from the countryside, but with a different spirit. She had studied, fought for her own dreams. When Carl told her where he came from, she smiled and said she remembered his family. She came from there too. Wasn't your father that man who sold cheese at the market? And didn't your mother make those beautiful embroideries that everyone wanted to buy? Hannah asked on their first date. Carl was surprised. No one had ever remembered his mother's embroideries. Yes. How do you know? My grandmother always bought her embroideries. She said they were the most beautiful in the region. They fell in love intensely. He was enchanted by the way she saw the world. She was drawn to Carl's good heart and raw care. For a long time everything worked. He worked. She took care of the house. They laughed together, understood each other even in their differences. Hannah said she felt she had found a safe place. The wedding came quickly, a simple ceremony with a few guests on a sunny Sunday. Hannah wore a simple dress she had bought on sale, but to Carl, she looked like a princess. His sisters, Joanna and Karen, insisted on organising everything. They already showed how much they liked being involved in their brother's life. The first years were sweet. They managed to buy a small house in a distant neighbourhood. Hannah worked in an office and Carl continued as a driver. They had simple dreams, a peaceful life, maybe children, a backyard with a mango tree like the one Hannah had in her childhood. And the children came. First Ethan, who was born with his father's eyes and his mother's curiosity. 3 years later, Ava arrived, with a strong temperament that surprised everyone. But love changes when children arrive. The differences that once seemed like details turned into chasms. Hannah wanted to raise the children with presence, listening, affection. She was concerned about their emotional well-being, the way they communicated, their schooling, nutrition and medication. On the other hand, Carl. He thought it was all an exaggeration. He believed that children only needed food on the table and a roof over their heads. Ethan is having nightmares again, Hannah commented one night while Carl was watching the news. I think he's anxious about changing schools. It's nonsense, Hannah. I had nightmares my whole life and my father never made such a fuss about it. And how did you feel when you were afraid and no one would listen to you? She asked, more sad than annoyed. Carl didn't respond. He just turned up the volume of the television. That's how it started. Small moments of disconnection that piled up like grains of sand, forming an insurmountable dune between them. Hannah sought books, information, tried to explain to Carl that children needed more than just to survive. They needed to be seen, heard. You need to be more present, she said, tired. They're fine, Hannah. I'm just tired from a long day of work. Each argument seemed to dig a hole in the middle of the marriage. And him? He never listened. Didn't even know how to talk. He was harsh, rude sometimes, as if he was always on the defensive with the world. Do you know what it's like to work all day carrying heavy loads? I come home and just want peace, but then it's you saying the boy needs this or that the girl is acting like this or that. Hannah swallowed her tears. I work too, Carl. I deal with problems all day long, handle things that tire the mind, and when I get home I still need to take care of the house, the kids, dinner, all by myself. But it's not the same, he interrupted. The worst part of all was how he exposed himself. Any argument would turn into a venting session for the sisters, and the sisters, oh the sisters, became judges of a marriage that wasn't theirs. They talked about her as if they knew her, as if they knew what it was like to raise 2 children, manage the household, and still try to keep an emotionally absent man. They judged everything. Even the medicine Hannah gave the children, even the choice of school. And Carl never defended Hannah. On the contrary, he allowed them to meddle. Ethan has concentration problems, Joanna. The doctor prescribed the medicine. In my day that didn't exist. It was just a lack of discipline, the sister-in-law replied, while Carl nodded in agreement. Hannah felt invisible, offended, as if her opinion didn't matter, not even about her own children. The visits from her sisters-in-law had become real tribunals, where she was always the defendant. She became silent, distanced herself. And him? He only noticed when she exploded. For him, as long as he had his peace, without anyone talking in his ear, everything was fine. A clean house, food on the table, well-behaved children. For him, everything was perfect, but she was overwhelmed, and he was the only one not to see it. On a particularly difficult night, after the children were already asleep, Hannah broke down. I'm exhausted, Carl. I can't do it anymore. I feel like I'm drowning and you don't even notice. Here you come with drama. It's not drama, it's my life, our life. You don't see me anymore, you don't see the kids. You just work, watch TV, sleep and repeat everything the next day. What do you want me to do? Quit my job? Become a clown? I want you to be a father, to be a husband, to help me raise these kids that are ours, not just mine. She said it firmly, almost in a whisper, but he was filled with anger. He thought it was an affront, an unfair accusation. It wounded his pride more than anything else. Infuriated, he paced around the house with eyes blazing and finally burst out, If you're not happy, I can solve this problem right now. That very night, Carl left the house. He didn't take much, just a few clothes and his cell phone. He went to stay at his older brother's house, in an improvised room at the back. They were separated for a few weeks. Nothing official. No papers signed. No definitive conversation. But the distance laid bare what, up close, Hannah still tried to ignore. He didn't want to change. He only missed her when she wasn't there. Carl returned after a month without warning. He arrived with a bag of bread and an embarrassed look. Hannah let him in, but something had changed within her. The heart, once filled with hope, now harboured only exhaustion. The exhaustion had turned into a stone in her chest. When he returned, the divorce papers had been filed. She didn't make a fuss. She simply accepted what was already broken inside. Carl didn't protest. Perhaps he thought it was too much pride to give in. Now there she was in front of the table, ready to sign. It was just a pen, a signature, and everything would be over. She opened the drawer. There it was. The pen. But it wasn't just the pen. A blue velvet box worn at the corners was there, with a note stuck to the lid. Before deciding, read this. Hannah hesitated. She felt a pang she couldn't name. She picked up the box. It wasn't heavy. Inside there was only a white envelope with Carl's crooked handwriting. She recognized it immediately. She sat down slowly, holding the envelope like someone holding a piece of the past that still breathes. She opened it. Hannah, I never knew how to speak. I didn't learn how to deal with feelings. In my house, men didn't cry, didn't talk. They just worked. And that's how I thought it was supposed to be. But since I left home, I saw what I lost. I saw the silence of the boys. I saw how much you are missed. And for the first time, I stopped thinking that everything was nonsense. I made mistakes. A lot. I left you alone, let my family interfere too much. And the worst, I didn't defend you. I was too proud to admit it, but the truth is you were always right. If you want to proceed with the divorce, I understand. But before that, I wanted you to know I love you, in my flawed but true way. And if there is still room, even just a little, I would like to try to do things differently. I don't promise perfection, but I promise to try. Truly. Carl. Hannah finished reading with a wet face. She sat for minutes staring at the letter. The papers were still there, the pen too. But for the first time in months she felt something different. Carl never knew how to speak. But now, in writing, he said what she always needed to hear. She looked back at the little box. There was something else inside. A small, shiny object, hidden under a folded piece of paper. It was the engagement ring he had given her 15 years ago. The ring she had returned when he left home. Hannah picked up the folded paper. It was a receipt, from a psychologist. Carl had started therapy 3 weeks ago. Without telling anyone, he was embarrassed. Without fanfare. For the first time, he had sought help. She looked at that receipt as if it were the most concrete proof of love she had ever received. More than flowers, more than gifts. A man nearly 50 years old, raised to hide emotions, had allowed himself to be vulnerable. She didn't sign that day, nor in the following days. The next week he came home with swollen eyes and trembling hands. He didn't say much, but he listened, and that was already a start. I talked to my sisters, he said, while having a coffee in the kitchen 3 days later. I told them they needed to respect our space, and that they shouldn't interfere so much anymore. I won't share private matters with them anymore either. Hannah looked at him surprised. And what did they say? They got angry. They said I was being manipulated. But he hesitated, took a sip of coffee. For the first time, I didn't care what they think. That night, Hannah went to bed with a small space of hope in her chest. A tiny, fragile space, but real. In the following weeks, Carl started coming home from work, still tired, but now different. One day he showed up with a children's storybook, something he hadn't cared about before. Another day he asked if he could take Ethan to football practice. He started attending Ava's school meetings. Small changes, but significant. One night, while the children were asleep, they sat on the couch. He timidly put his arms around her. The silence was no longer hostile, just quiet, as if it were waiting to be filled. "Why now, Carl?" she finally asked. "Why only when it was almost over?" He ran his hand over his face, a gesture she knew well. It was what he did when he needed to find words. "Because I was afraid, truly afraid of losing what matters. I realized my children weren't making a point of being close to me. And what matters? You all matter." Their love didn't return all of a sudden, but the listening did. And with it, the possibility of rebuilding. Hannah kept the divorce papers stored in a folder. Sometimes on bad days, she would look at them and wonder if she was making the right choice. But then she would see Carl lying on the floor, almost asleep but still playing with Ava, or helping Ethan with his homework, and she would think that maybe it was worth waiting, to see how far this change could go. And sometimes starting over doesn't mean erasing everything. It's looking at the broken pieces on the floor and saying, it's still worth putting them together. Love only survives when there is humility to recognize mistakes and courage to change. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.